own work proves they were dead wrong about this just 2 years ago. And now suddenly they did the math right. They've written a model. They can even prove their solution, which is integrated with gold, which we've then validated 4 decades ago. Likewise. Come on, people. You know, I mean, if I saw G. Edward Griffin in public, I'd want to throw his book back at him, and I'd certainly want my money back. What a phony. So, in all this, you know, what do we have? We have, we actually have negligible consumption of interest above principal is the actual fact. How many of us, well, think about this, how many of us are selling our production to banks to the extent that accounts for all the interest that we're paying out of circulation as a result of this obfuscation of the currency? You know, that is negligible. In all this, while this person, both these persons, Dove of Oneness and G. Edward Griffin, who ought to be shamed forever by all this vacillation, without explanation, without saluting, dividing us, calling another thing solution when this guy's math is no better now than it was then, I'm sure. You know, advocating the gold standard. How do you do that? Exactly how do you put that in how do you implement that without injustice, G. Edward Griffin? I'm calling you out. So there's not a word in his work about laundering principal into these banks' possession for merely publishing the evidence of our promissory obligations together. Where can this guy take you? There's not a word about this either, because none of these people have done a fundamental analysis of the nature of a promissory obligation, or evidently because, on the other hand, they simply accept that it is right or even justified that a banking system retain the evidence of fulfilled promissory obligations to each other, which rightly only retires the principal, instead of artificially enriching the purported banking system to the extent of all the principle ever created in this ever unjustified, purposed obfuscation of the currency. Well, let's see, I'm going to skip around here a little bit here. As I said, I heard from, Iceland again this week over Facebook, 2 people in Iceland. They have a new site they have up, and, I've actually had pretty extensive discussions with several people in Iceland about solving their problems. So I saw that I think there was a friend request from Birgitta Johnsdotter, and I'm going to respond to her likewise. And I Birgitta, I think, is genuinely interested in helping her people. But she, I responded to this friend request on Facebook, and and that I meant to help. And she writes me back. This is what she wrote. She says simply, "Your solution is among many other great concepts of change," she says. "Your solution is among many other great concepts of change." How can that be? forgive me if you will. I'm going to give you the perspective of a mathematician. If I asked you a question, what's the answer to this? What's the sum of 2 plus 3? We would all say 5. But if someone said, oh, it could be 7, it could be 9, it could be 4, it could be 0, it could be negative 133, and it also could be 138,873. Well, you look at them and they would go, what the hell's with you? Now, the question is here, are there principles? If there is a principle, then what is the answer that implements that principle? In other words, if we have a definition of inflation and deflation, which is respectively an increase in circulation for goods and services or a decrease in circulation for goods and services, there is one and one only thing which solves inflation and deflation. And that happens to be eradication of interest and obligatory scheduled payment, which is what mathematically perfected economy is. Likewise, if interest inherently and irreversibly multiplies artificial indebtedness in proportion to capacity to pay, there's one solution to terminal failure, and that's eradication of interest likewise, which was part of our first solution in this, our third solution of our third categoric fault. And then, as I give these categoric faults, 3 of them, the second one I usually give is systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property. Well, as I've explained for weeks now and decades, actually, 40 years, likewise, there is one and one only solution for systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money, which is what every other grievance or injustice falls under. And that is the combination of the first and third solutions. Because by solving inflation and deflation, we eradicate any power to affect the volume of the circulation. And by eradicating interest, we further eradicate any power to upset, subvert, corrupt the relationship between a circulation and the remaining value of the wealth that it's intended to represent, and must represent immutably if the currency can commit no offense against anyone. So these things are indispensable. Yet Brigida writes to me, she writes, your solution is among many other great concepts of change. How can that possibly be? 40 years ago I was telling people there's one solution. It says on every page of my website, the singular solution for these 3 categoric faults. And I'll give you a little background. As I say, I think Brigida is a genuine person. In our discussion, she just didn't seem to get it. Oh, this is too complicated. She wanted to get away, and she didn't get it. And so what does she do? She refers this to somebody else to talk to, who is an economist. Well, now, I had this discussion with this economist as well. His name was Thor Sari. And in this whole discussion, I explained mathematically perfected economy in detail off the top of my head, And there is no disputing, and I mean, frankly, I've got a whole country in jeopardy. If I'm engaging in a hopefully fruitful discussion with a person, and something is asserted, and I don't offer my work in just the terms of an assertion, I offer it with all the background, which proves it. Now, if someone is asserting something which doesn't make sense, I challenge it, and I would challenge it, because if I'm representing all these people, It's important that we understand this is a solution. This guy's saying he's got a singular solution, and he's telling me all about it for hours on end. And you mean I'm just going to let him go on and on and on without challenging him the first place he falls down? No. This isn't how you learn anything. This isn't how you master it. So when I give the solution to inflation and deflation, this man doesn't challenge me. When I give the solution to maldisposition, he doesn't challenge me. When I give the solution to inherent irreversible multiplication of artificial indebtedness by interest, he doesn't challenge me. And when I give the solution to systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, he doesn't challenge me. But it never goes anywhere. So Brigida passed it off to this fellow Thorsari. And thanks to a young fellow named Thor Einerson, at least there's a thin thread of communication by which Iceland may someday get its affairs straight. But how is it even possible? There are multiple solutions. I've been doing this for 40 years and no one has demonstrated an alternate solution even for inflation and deflation yet. Some people like Dove of Oneness might claim this, but they're, blithering idiots. Ellen Hodgson Brown can't even explain how these things happen in what she called the most brilliant banking model in our nation's history, which were the words of Mike Montagne coming out of Benjamin Franklin's mouth in My Parable of Perfect Economy. Show us a brilliant banking model that actually existed at that time. But Brigida says your solution is among many other great concepts of change. It is, however, not the only one. Wow. Those are the words of a person that the math went over their head, passed this off to someone else, and yet this person's responsible for interacting or interfacing with possible solutions. How can she possibly say this? How can she possibly say this? Prove it. Prove another solution. The truth of the matter is, these are difficult issues, and people there are fearful to stand up against the banks to do the only thing right, But whatever further things, if any, guiding her in this, certainly it's not mastery of the issues. Certainly it's not the math. So I wrote her back. Her post was yesterday. And I wrote her back. I said, that's the problem, Brigida. If there were an alternate solution for one, and I'm reading you this so that you understand, here's a person in this important position. She's been explained this before, and she is being explained it again. I always explain it when it's necessary to. So I say, that's the problem, Brigida. If there were an alternate solution for 1, inflation and deflation, 2, systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, or 3, inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness by interest, you could cite those alternate solutions, couldn't you? No one has, and no one ever will, because 2 things alone solve inflation, deflation, and maldistribution alone. Maldisposition, I meant to say. Eradication of interest, and an obligatory schedule of payment, paying and retiring principal at the rate of consumption or depreciation of the related property. Whoever has demonstrated to you, or why would you even think there is an alternate solution to inflation, deflation, and maldisposition? Likewise, is there an alternate solution to inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness by interest? Well, she might think there is, because all these people are copying me. Debt-free money now and other interest-free monies. These people are just plagiarizing my work.